Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Joanne Butcher, and I am a business coach for filmmakers. And I started doing the filmmaker's life when COVID first hit, and I realized that my friends who are usually on set or flying around the world or whatever were actually available, and so I could get them. I could actually pin them down and have an appointment, and actually get to talk to them. So anyway, we kept going, and I love doing these interviews. And really, what we talk about in the interviews is how you have created a path in your career as a filmmaker. And I think that often when I speak to filmmakers who are wanting to have that career, they think that there's a certain path. And what I've really learned from these conversations is there's no path whatsoever. It's all different for everybody. So I don't do introductions because we're going to find out all about Tatiana in our conversation. But I would love to introduce you to Tatiana Bacchus. She's a fabulous filmmaker. We've been working together now for a while. And so my first question always is, when did you first know that you were a filmmaker?
Oof. When did I first know I was a filmmaker? I would say it's very funny because even after doing a short documentary film in 2012-ish, I would not have called myself a filmmaker then. I think trying to do a feature-length documentary that stalled out also made me feel like I was not a filmmaker. And I had always thought when I finished a film and I had it and it was at a festival or was distributed, then I would call myself a filmmaker. And the reality is, I think the media landscape changed because film was this finite 90 minutes, 120-minute piece, and then there was media. And so I even say that I'm a film and media maker. And I would say that probably around 2016, I would say, when I decided to start working on Ulrick, the documentary that I'm working on now, was when I felt like I was a filmmaker. I was going to take a shot at this, and I was going to carry the water no matter how long it took.
Well, um, if you go back to that younger self that was making that documentary and not calling herself a filmmaker, do you think that was not fair now that you look back on it?
I mean, I was an actor
Mm-hmm.
who didn't have work to do. And so I think that I was dabbling. Didn't know what I was doing. And at that time, I would have said I was a storyteller. I had a story to tell, and somebody else was the filmmaker.
Right, right. So when did you first know you were an actor?
Um, Look, I'm 22 years in and still try. I felt like when I get this feature role, when somebody gives
Uh-huh.
me this, but I've been an actor since I think 1996 when I did my first community theater. I got my first community theater role. That was when I kind of got the bug and I was like, I can do this. I get laughs. I can remember lines. And so from that point on, I pursued becoming an actor. I think being an actor was a much easier admission to myself than
Uh-huh.
being a filmmaker.
Uh-huh.
And
Uh-huh.
so, was it fair to the younger me? Um, no, I mean, not at all. But I think society, the industry, right? When you look for that body or that person that is going to say, yes, yes, young person, I grant you, you are a filmmaker, or you have reached the level of actor. Um, and so was it fair? No, but I didn't have the accomplishment that I felt like, I had a bachelor's degree. Let's put it that way. I had a college degree that would tell
Mm-hmm.
me I was a college graduate. There was
Mm-hmm.
some finite benchmark that allowed me to know that I had achieved something. And so with acting and filmmaking, it was so nebulous.
A few years ago, I sent out a survey to everybody on my email list, or filmmakers, right? And I asked this question that I thought was a really silly question. And it was, um, uh, how many of you make both documentaries and fiction films?
Right.
And nearly everybody said me. And I was
Oh,
shocked. I was really
wow.
shocked. And so when you and I started working together, we started working on, you said, I'm a documentary filmmaker, I'm making a documentary. I was like, great. And then all kinds of things came out that I wasn't expecting. But you are one filmmaker that I think of really who really puts, I would say, an equal amount of effort into your documentary filmmaking as well as your fiction work, which has mostly been screenwriting recently. But
Right.
so I wonder if you could tell me first about your documentary work and particularly about a bit about Ulrick so everybody can hear about that.
Sure. I think as an actor, I imagined myself in the world of narrative. I did some voiceover work. And so I had done some short form doc voiceover. And as an actor, I thought I didn't see myself in the documentary world. I didn't see a space for myself. So I
Mm-hmm.
always imagined us in narrative. Um, and the first thing that we got an opportunity to do, my old producing partner, myself, was a short documentary called Porches. And we interviewed 5 African-American women from ages 90 to the oldest was turning 105 the week we shot. And it was post Obama's election. And the idea was that we wanted to hear from these women their thoughts about the first Black president in America and their reflections. And the interesting part was that they did speak about that, but their lives were actually much more compelling than just this moment.
Mm.
And once we did that one and had some support, it was $2,500 to do the film from a local television channel. And it was somebody else who told us about the opportunity, was co-writing the proposal. So we didn't do a lot of the heavy lifting, but we did the interviews with the women. We found the women. And once I did that one time, I was like, oh, this is a film. I can just do this again and make it a little bit longer. And so the next thing in the doc world that I tried to work on and I still have and will go back to was a documentary called Freedom Denied. And it was about a Haitian political refugee who had come here in 85 on a false passport and was incarcerated for 3.5 years. And so it was about his fight for freedom and the unique group of individuals that came together to fight with him. And then, I was so new and there was no appetite for it at the time in terms of raising money. Um, I got into some rooms where with the like public broadcast system where money was, and there was a little bit of mentorship and information. And somebody looked at my proposal and said, we just funded a documentary that was a historical doc about immigration. And so it was not the right time. Now, right now with the Haitians and what's going on in Haiti, it is the right time to bring back this. And also after the administration of 45 and making the credible fear, which is the thing that our subject had to prove. And that's what INS was fighting, that he had a credible fear of remaining in Haiti. And
Mm-hmm.
that's why he needed asylum. And the
Mm-hmm.
last administration has made what was hard 30 years ago even harder for Haitians. And it's disproportionate treatment.
Right.
So there's a lot of things I could say about that project. And it was a little heartbreaking to know that I was not able to be successful to raise the money to finish that film, and I had to leave it on the shelf.
Mm. Was that a
Um,
short, did you say, or a
it
feature?
was originally I had envisioned it as a feature,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
and so now I'm thinking that it is likely going to start as a short,
Uh-huh.
and then we'll see. So now I'm back instead of being in production. Now I'm back in development, reimagining it. And
nice.
we'll go back and reimagine it. And
Nice.
then right now, the documentary I'm actively working on and have been working on since 2016 is called Ulrick Jean-Pierre, Guardian of History. And that is about a Haitian master painter, Ulrick Jean-Pierre, who spent the last 40 years painting Haitian and American history. And I say with exacting detail and visceral impact. And he has painted about the Haitian Revolution and about America. We filmed it in Haiti, Philadelphia, Kansas, New Orleans, and we are in early post-production with this film. We anticipate the film being completed this year.
Fabulous. And how did you come across Ulrick? How did you find out about him? And why did you decide you wanted to make a film about him?
Well, again, I think my hybrid background, how I got to become an actor and got stalled out and then ended up on the behind the camera side. And I didn't go to film school, all kind of played a part into how I came to tell this story. I knew Ulrick as a child. He was a friend of my mother's.
Uh-huh.
And
might it be that you might be Haitian?
I am Haitian. Thank you, Joanne. Both of my
that
parents are Haitian. And I was born here.
You're
Yeah.
Haitian-American. You're
Yes,
Haitian-American.
I'm Haitian-American. I did exactly what I was raised to do, which was assimilate perfectly into the American culture. And in
Uh-huh.
the process of
Oh
doing
my God.
that,
You know, I lived in Miami for 18 years before. Now I'm back, but that was one of the astounding things to me when I would work in schools here,
mhm,
that you could not tell the difference between African American and Haitian American kids, except that the Haitian Americans had such fabulous names.
mhm.
French
Yeah,
names.
I think that's
The
a survival mechanism.
the level of assimilation is astounding because I'm half Trinidadian,
Mhm.
and you can tell a Trinidadian kid by their accent.
Right,
You can
right.
tell a Jamaican kid by their accent. Haitian kids, absolutely not.
Yeah.
It's really something. So you're saying that what's your theory about that level of assimilation?
I mean, I know that coming up in my house, there's a few things. My grandfather was a judge in Haiti. So my mom came from an affluent family. My father came from a well-off family. My grandfather in Haiti built the first church in his town. But I was raised to be a lady. So the diction was very important.
Uh-huh,
We
right.
read the Bible out loud most nights. And so there were behavior. So it was like upper class behavior. And I
Hmm.
think the main thing that my mother always reinforced for me was, as a Black woman in America, I would have to work twice as hard as my white peers to get half as much.
Hmm.
And so the, you know, growing up in the 80s and 90s, being Haitian was one of the worst things you could be. There was so much racism, there was so much bigotry, especially when the AIDS epidemic came out. It
Oh God,
was,
yes. Hmm.
yeah. So I think, one, it was just who my mother was. If you see my mother, both my parents, like elegant, proud people. So whether I was in Haiti or whether I was here, like my mom came here speaking 3 languages. My mother, they were educated, loving, giving, intellectually thoughtful people. So that wouldn't have changed.
Hmm.
Um, my parents would have loved it if I learned French. That's the one thing that I didn't do. But I think the assimilation is really about survival. It's about being able to go into the space and get an education, get work, and not stick out. But I think the sad thing is that when you assimilate so well, what I found out with Ulrick is that there's such a longing for the culture that I left behind.
Hmm.
And I think the other thing was that my mother came over here and she protested um, against the US's support of Haiti. And she translated for political refugees. So that was part of what my tie was to freedom denied. So when I was a kid and my grandmother died, my mother couldn't go home. I didn't know at the time. I just thought that we didn't have money for tickets or whatever. I was a kid,
Right. Right.
but I didn't realize that my mother, from what she had told me later when I interviewed her, her father had told her she was on a hit list. And if she had come home, she would have been killed or at least disappeared. And they
Oh,
wouldn't be able to get her before damage was done. So I had no access outside of my home. I had no
right.
access to Haiti.
Right. Right.
But I was also just a kid, as a kid, and pop culture, it's amazing, playing Atari and going to the mall, and I had nothing but American friends.
Uh-huh.
So
Uh-huh.
inside my house it was Haiti, and outside it was America.
Yes. I really, oh my God, I so identify with that. At home, we were Trinidadian, and then
Yep.
when I went to school, we were English, and that was that, you know.
Yeah.
And I never had any other experience, you know, but everybody at home was Trinidadian, and yeah, yeah. I didn't ever feel a love that what I saw with the Haitian kids in Miami, that level of pressure to assimilate. I never saw that,
Yeah.
you know, before I saw that in Miami. It was beyond anything that I'd experienced anywhere else, and
Well,
it
and I
was
think that if you think about like the Cuban Haitian wet foot dry foot,
mm-hmm.
like nobody was showing up for Haitians.
No,
Nobody was showing up
no.
saying, we love you. We see even what we saw at the border with the, border patrol people with whips driving
Oh my
Haitians back.
God, the recent, yeah, the recent
Yes,
images,
all
yeah.
of the flights. I think there's been 200 flights deporting Haitians, including children. And,
With the situation now being so dangerous, yeah.
so even now, to be a Haitian child,
Yeah.
I cannot imagine what it's like to be a Haitian kid in middle school,
Right.
high school, trying to find your way, seeing these images,
Yes.
hearing a leader of your country calling Haiti a shithole.
Yes.
So, for me, I think one, I was raised in accordance with the value system and a level of education and self-comportment
Mm-hmm.
that
Mm-hmm.
my parents had.
Mm-hmm.
And so that would not have changed whether we were welcomed and
Right.
loved. That was just who my parents were from a value perspective. But I also think that they had lived as Black people in America long enough to know that if we wanted to be successful, there was no second chances for us.
Mm. That's right. And so your film, Ulrich, what do you think? I have a, I'm not quite sure how to ask this question, but with your film, I feel as though there are some goals that you have
Right.
with the film um, that are for, to use a rather cliched phrase, but to sort of uplift
Mhm.
Haitian people, Haitian culture, Haitian. Would you say that's a motivation for you for the film?
Absolutely. I mean, I think I often say it's a love letter to Haiti and her people. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that it wasn't until I walked into a gallery of Ulrich's work that I saw myself reflected back to me with dignity, right?
Uh-huh.
With beauty and respect and love. And it was like being kicked in the solar plexus
Yes.
to think that I was in my 40s the first time I saw myself, you know. And
Yeah.
so for me, it is for every member of the Haitian diaspora to be able to see these images if they have never, to know that there's a place that they can go to learn more of their history, to see more of themselves, to see our Haitian women freedom fighters, right? These are histories that we have not been told, they've been hidden. And so the premise for me of Ulrich is to excavate a hidden history, even to the point of helping people understand that the United States is the size it is because of the Haitian Revolution.
Mm.
If the Haitians hadn't overthrown the French, Napoleon doesn't need the money to do the Louisiana Purchase,
Mm.
right? And it took me going to see Ulrich's work and working with our contributing producer, Dr. Cecile Axelian, to understand that New Orleans looks like Cap-Haïtien Haiti.
Uh-huh, uh-huh,
The
uh-huh.
things that we love about New Orleans, so much of that comes from Haiti. And we don't even know. We just love it. We love it. We eat it. We celebrate it. We wear it. And we have no idea where it comes from.
When you talk about going into that gallery and seeing yourself for the first time in
Yeah.
Ulrich's work, that moment happened to me. I was also in my 40s. I was in Miami, and as part of my job, I had to go and be kind of the MC for this film, and we were going to show 6 films by Sergio Hiral. He's been a guest on this series, a Cuban Afro-Cuban filmmaker, and so we showed one of his films, and I was supposed to lead a Q&A afterwards, and I couldn't speak.
Right.
I
Yeah.
couldn't. There was no Q&A. And it was the first time, and these were Cubans, but it was Africans who were arriving in the Caribbean,
Right.
and Sergio Herral did all his films told the history of Afro-Cubans from the time they arrived until. So I in the, I was speechless because
Yeah.
I had never seen my ancestors
Yeah.
on the screen before. I
Right.
think the closest, I guess, was Roots, which
Hmm.
felt different because it was American.
Yeah.
But seeing Caribbean people, I was speechless. And I believe that as filmmakers, what you're talking about with your film about Ulrich, that, when you had that experience of walking into the gallery and seeing yourself for the first time, or the same way that I had that experience of seeing myself for the first time, um, that to be able to take that out to the larger world is
Yeah.
so incredibly important because um, this is maybe going down a way, but when I was studying Derrida and Jacques Lacan, and he talked about when in that moment in early childhood, when children get the mirror stage and they see themselves in the mirror, and at
Yeah.
first they only see like hand, arm, they see themselves as body parts,
Right.
and eventually they see themselves as themselves. They
Yeah.
First of all, they don't experience themselves as anything but part of the mother, and then there's a stage where they become themselves.
Right.
And so what you're saying was in your 40s. For me,
Mhm.
I think it was also in my 40s when
Yeah.
I saw myself.
Right. Right.
That's an incredibly powerful experience to be able to share with people.
I
So
mean, I
where
think
where are you at with the film? What's been going on
so. We're
recently?
in early post. We have our editor who has the hard drive. We have some support from our executive producer. So our editor is Leila Kazmi. Our executive producer, one of our executive producers, Hans Charles, has gotten us support, assistant editing support through George Mason University, and thankfully there's a grant that allows him to pay assistant editors, which is really important to us because I think that artists need to be paid for the work that they do. And so we're very excited about that. We haven't announced it yet, so you're hearing it first. I mean, Joanne, but we received a
I know all the
$10,000.
secrets.
Yes, we've recently been awarded a $10,000 grant for archival research and licensing and all the good things from the Green Family Foundation in Miami, for which we are so grateful. And that allows us to bring on an archival researcher, an archival consultant, and a production coordinator to help support that process while I try to keep the other plates spinning. Um, and
Is that
so, and
public now? Has the foundation announced it yet?
I don't
Or are you
believe they've
keeping it
announced it
secret?
yet,
Okay,
but they've
nobody's
just,
heard.
yes, they sent me, I have an email that I have to respond to with their logo. So I've got to figure out. um, but we are, I'll be reaching out to places. Like, one of the exciting things is identifying partners and sponsors. So we have a wonderful fiscal sponsor, Allied Arts Foundation of in Seattle. And it's the dance now of getting additional money to bring this project over the finish line. we'll finish it with what we have, but of course, the more money we have, the higher quality, the faster we can get it done. And so,
With the Green Family Foundation grant, you said it was for
yes,
archival. Is it for research or for paying for or
our archival process. So it's,
okay?
yeah, so we'll
Okay.
do the, so that'll be
What
staff.
kind of archival images are you looking for?
So we will be pulling archives. The nice thing is, we'll be looking for archival stuff from Haiti in the 70s.
Mm,
So Ulrich's kind of earlier 60s, 70s. It's not necessarily a cradle to grave story. It is really about Ulrich's time, just before he arrives here in the US,
mm,
and then makes the decision to do this epic Haitian history series in anticipation of the 2004 bicentennial, and
mm.
then bringing us forward to where he is now. So we'll establish in Haiti the town that he's from. He came over already, a significantly talented painter, and that's really important in our story, is for people to understand that he didn't just get trained here in America and become a master. He
Uh-huh.
trained under masters in Haiti. So we'll
Right.
look for that,
Right.
those archives.
Which is why his work has that, why it's so instantly recognizable as
Yeah.
Haitian. I don't quite understand how that's possible, but there's I don't know if we could share some images. Oh yes, thank you, Lexi. But there's a style of painting that is uniquely Haitian,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
completely uniquely Haitian, and it's
and it's
recognizable as soon as you see it.
I mean, for him, it's, the colors, the flag, what I've learned is the word cosmography. There's so much light, and cloud work. He's painting the history of Haiti.
Mm-hmm.
So it is, these important heroes. And some people say it's like a Renaissance artist. Some people, relate him to a French master, but it's funny because he will name the Haitian masters he trained under. So those are some of the archives we're going after. And then also from Philadelphia, where he spent his first like 20 years in state here.
Just
And
going to show
so,
some,
yeah,
just so
please,
that you'll have
please.
a bit of a sense of his work.
He's absolutely incredible. And so one of the things like this one, Marie Laveau, which you're scrolling past, which is a voodoo priestess. And one of the things that's incredible, and this is set in historic New Orleans,
Yes.
but in that window you see, that's what they talk about, the cosmography, the light, the clouds, and
Uh-huh.
there's an iconic church there.
Uh-huh.
So again, there's some markings that we would look at. We have filmed this church now, but we might also film the church from the time of, or look for archival photos and video of the church
Right.
and New Orleans back then, when Haitians were arriving and building the town. So we'll
Mm.
look at New Orleans archives and Philadelphia archives as well.
Mm. Oh, that's so interesting. Yeah, hearing how you're building the film. And who is this?
That
I'm
one I
assuming
believe is that, I
Toussaint
don't know if that's
Louverture.
Toussaint Louverture.
I would
Yes.
think. Yes,
Or
yes.
Jean-Jacques Dessalines. I
Mm,
think I think that's Toussaint.
yes.
It's small on my screen. And that over there is Queen Anacaona, who was the Taino queen, who's the first queen of Haiti.
Uh-huh. Yeah, Taino being the one of the Native American tribes in the
Or native
Caribbean
Haitian, yes.
and in Trinidad as well. Oh,
Yeah, yeah.
Taino as
Right.
well.
And so these are the things that, in America, we tell the history of, I hate to say it, just white men, like white men who are the forefathers. And we don't, if you grow up in an American education, you may not even think about the women rulers of the world,
Mm.
who set the precedent. And I think one of the wonderful things about knowing about the Haitian Revolution, there's a Wakaima, which was the voodoo ceremony right before the revolution's call to action. And Boukman was one of the people, but it was a Jamaican who was part of, Boukman is a slave. He was an enslaved person from Jamaica. So
Ah,
this enslaved people in Haiti came together and fought for their freedom, and was the first successful revolution or overthrow of their white slave masters. And so Haiti
yeah,
was the
in
first Black
history,
Republic.
in all history. Hmm.
And then Haiti donated. They took their not just their people, but they inspired freedom around the world. And so that's the other thing growing up as a Haitian child, is that in America, we didn't want to tell that history, right? We didn't want American slaves to even know that Black people had successfully overthrown their masters.
Right.
So this, for people that were writing our original history, was a moment in the dark that they did not want to celebrate. So I never saw myself reflected in history.
Yes.
And
That's
Ulrick,
such a good point. That's such a good point, that for the powers that be, the idea that the slaves could be running the show was not what you wanted to be letting people know about. But
oh,
it's a great inspiration. So I'm really glad to hear about the documentary and how. So you're thinking you're going to finish it by the end of the year? Did you say?
yep.
Nice, nice. So here we are, Tatiana and I happily working on a documentary, and then she suddenly makes an announcement. Joanne, so tell us that story about
Uh,
your script writing work.
yeah, and I think Adrian, who's on this call, is my friend. We haven't had a chance to connect, so she's going to hear some new news
Oh.
probably. Um, yeah, no. So September of last year, I had been on a panel, and everything in my world is like hybrid, weird, how it comes together. It's just whether you believe in the universe or whatever. So I think it starts with this film that I did called The Upside. I was in Philadelphia. You generally get what's called under five roles. So films are cast in LA or New York, and if they're shot
Right,
in Philadelphia,
right.
then they'll fill in all the kind of the other roles, and generally they're under 5 lines. And
Hmm.
so I got one of
I
these
know that
roles
term, the under five, but
under
I have
five.
from living in Miami before, I have many friends who have been under five, and I didn't know
Yes.
that term,
Yeah.
but yeah.
So I had this under five role in this film called The Upside. And I happened to be in the trailer, which was my first Hollywood film, first time. And I was playing a scene opposite Kevin Hart. And so
Oh,
around the time The Upside, thank you, Joanne, was coming out, I was working on Ulrick, but that's really kind of sexy for Philly. That's really sexy
oh
for
yeah,
one of our actors to be in a
sexy for
film,
anywhere.
right? In the trailer, there was two of us. I think a few of us from Philly got into the trailer. And I was asked by the film office to be on a panel called She Creates. They'd known I was doing the documentary work. They'd known that I had done some children's programming work. And I was on a panel with some curators from film festivals. And there was one woman who was an executive producer for Hallmark films. And I thought, and everybody's showing work. Well, I was early stage with Ulrick. I was like, I had known people don't, it's not really sexy. I'm doing this documentary. We don't have the money to finish it. People don't know the history. They don't necessarily care. But here I had this trailer that I was in with a A-list celebrity that was very sexy. And so for my time to talk, you know, the festival showed their amazing clips of their amazing work of all these amazing films. And I was like, well, I'm going to show the trailer from The Upside, which I did. And then I said, and everybody oohed and awed. And I said, yeah, that's really sexy, right? And I said, it took me 22 years to get those 5 lines.
Mm.
22 years, right? So what do you do while you are trying to get a break, while Hollywood is not seeing you, while people are not writing roles for you, while you are trying to stay as unemployed as possible so you can go on all these auditions that you are 99% of the time not going to get. And so I created stories that were impactful to me. And and then I transitioned and talked about Ulrick and the lessons that I had learned through this process. So when it was over, the executive that was on the panel with us came up and, just complimented me on my presentation. I went about my business. And September, like 2 years later, she reached out to me on Instagram.
No
And this was
way. I didn't know
post.
that.
Uh-huh.
2 years?
Uh-huh. Now, so what I will say is she did reach out to me on LinkedIn. This is why you should check your socials, people. And I did not see it because I was not really good on LinkedIn. And she afterwards just complimented me,
I'm going to take a moment here, Tatiana. I just
Yes.
want to say something.
Yes.
When you meet an executive, when you're on a panel,
Yes, Joanne.
you get their business card and
Yes.
you write to them. Sorry,
Yes.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Right, right. That's the way it should be. And I had everybody's email because,
Now you know that.
the
No.
organizers send you an email saying all the logistics, right? Here's parking here. So I had her email, but
Yeah.
she's an executive. I'm who I am. So this is post George Floyd, which I think is very important in this story because the death of George Floyd caused, I think, a catastrophic shift in this country in terms of how we see Blackness, how we see how the system has treated Black people. And a lot, and there was a calling forth of kind of reconciliation, kind of a truth and reconciliation. A lot of people were saying Black Lives Matter. A lot of corporations were saying Black Lives Matter. I know as a Black person, I was kind of exhausted by getting all these Black Lives Matter emails and statements and positionings. And the question was, are we really going to do the work? Or are we just going to just send these emails?
Yeah.
So Dawn did something, Dawn is the exec I'm working with, that I found very brave. She reached out to me on Instagram months after George Floyd had passed, and when we started to see all these people looking for Black stories. So, and it probably was not many months. I think, I don't speak for the collective Black audience or collective Black community, but I know for my friends in particular and myself, I was exhausted. I was exhausted of seeing Black people being murdered. I was exhausted about seeing the system fail us continually. And then on top of that kind of exhaustion came this, oh, for so long we've locked out Black voices and a lot of other marginalized communities. And now everybody was saying, well, where are all the Black voices? So there's a scramble to find people. And Dawn reached out to me on Instagram and said, hey, this is kind of a weird question, but would you be interested in writing a screenplay for Hallmark from the Black experience? Or would you know anybody that would be interested? And I thought, well, look, 22 years I've been at this and no one has given me a shot, right? While I was sitting on the panel with this woman and she's talking about the 4 films she's made for Hallmark that year, I was like, who gets that opportunity, right? Who gets to do that? Because no one in my world. We can't even get one made, right? I can't get a short made. That's important, So I said, yeah. And she said, it's not Shakespeare, it's formulaic. I can tell you, I can kind of guide you. And I was like, give it a shot. And so I said, can I bring some friends that are also writers? Because at that time I wouldn't have considered myself a screenwriter. I had never written a screenplay. But I knew that there were some talented people that had been trying to get indoors that were shut. And so she said, yeah. And we talked about kind of how the process would be. And she said, send me a few log lines. And if I like them, then we'll move to like a 10 to 14 sentence synopsis. And then if we like that, then we'll go to like a 1-page. So I said, okay, so how about,
this is another amazing thing here, because I think most writers don't realize what you just described. So the 1-sentence log line, then we'll go to a, what was it? 12,
10 to 14 sentence
synopsis, then to a 1-page. And the I think that for writers, that's just a horrifying concept.
Yeah, yeah.
But the truth is that that's just the way the industry works. And there's no reason actually to, and this was one of the things that you and I took, when you revealed to me that this was going on, and I know, one of the things I was saying is no, don't write the script.
Right.
Just work with what she wants, and going to that synopsis is the next level.
Right.
And I know that for myself, I've had to do it myself, ask people for a log line. 90% of them, more than 90%, are absolutely not what you ask for.
Right.
It's really bizarre. I don't know why. But anyway, 90% are not what you ask for. And then of the 10% that are what you ask for, then you say, can I get a synopsis?
Right.
Then you can tell quite a lot from that. It's really interesting to be in that process. So what did you do? Did you send her 1,000 log lines, or what did you do?
Well, we agreed on 10. And so I brought my friends and I said, listen, here's the opportunity. I will run point because, you know, we had one person who had a lot going on. I said, I will get all the log lines and then I will present them to her. And if she's interested, I will come to you and say, this is her feedback. And so I did that. And I think there were 5 of us in the original document, or 10 log lines from 5 writers. And she passed on one immediately. And she was interested in a few others. So I did the back and forth. And 2 of us kind of went all the way with her to getting into, once she was satisfied that she had the synopsis and she was interested in doing more, we then went into a 1 sheet and I closed the circle with the writer. So I made the introduction between her and the writer so that they could work together. And then I stepped to the side to support and to be a sounding board. But at that point, then it was that writer and the exec working independently of me. And for me, I had a few, I think 2 maybe in that initial batch, 2 or 3 that she was interested in. And just the way I guess my brain works, I ended up having maybe 5 through the process of, well, what about this? And what about this? And what about this? And so in that initial process, we started working on the 1 sheets and the back and forth. And we came up with a 1 sheet for a film called Sincerely Yours, Joy. And it was about a woman who made custom-made candles that blended the sense from the African diaspora culture with traditional Christmas sense. And I tapped one of my friends who is from Zimbabwe, and I asked her, what is a very powerful smelling flower from Zimbabwe? And what is your grandmother's name? And so that was kind of the candle that she had, and she was going after this competition. So I ended up kind of writing a few ideas, I think maybe 2 or 3 1 sheets. That actually the first one we did, and she sent it to a huge production company. And they passed immediately. And she said, you know, this is a new writer. She's a Black woman, Haitian-American woman. And what they had said was that it felt like 2 different stories. It felt like the protagonists were competing. And so they said, we would be interested in looking at it again if you worked with her. So we worked on it. So they did a soft pass the first time. And then we sent it in again, and then they passed. And they said, we're just going to kind of stick with the people that we have that they trusted. And that was fine. And then she had kind of took my work to a second production company. And the feedback, he passed on that original idea, but said, I would like Tatiana to submit something from her personal experience as a Haitian American. Now, these are Christmas romances.
Right.
I am a divorced
with fucking Hallmark
single woman. And I was like, if you really want something from my personal experience, it looks more like a Christmas horror story. It is not a Christmas romance. I have been single for 14 years. But I was like, okay, so for me, this was like, find the note within the note, right? The note was write a romance, infuse my Haitian background, not necessarily my tragic love stories. So, you know, I put together and
laughing so hard, but I'm with you, Tatiana.
Yes. Then I was like, well, just like write like what you would like to happen. I don't know. So I came up with a few other concepts, one that I really loved, and the exec passed, but he said, I'm passing on this one because it's too much like something we're doing for Netflix right now. So what I appreciate about my exec, Dawn, is that she came back to me and said, this is really great. It's, yes, he passed, but it means that you're on the pulse. And eventually Calling on Christmas was one that I had developed. And this again is really early. And these are just 1 sheets that we had developed. And she loved the name Calling on Christmas. She felt like she could sell that. And I decided, against what Joanne's advice, I was terrified. I'm like, if they say, like, write this script, and one of the things she asked me is like, well, how long do you think it would take? I don't know. I've never done this before. So I was like, you know what? The holidays are coming. I'm just going to go ahead and write this.
Yes. Yes.
I'm going to see, I think I can do it over the holidays. I have some downtime. And I ended up not being able to do it over the holidays, but I think I started right after the holidays. It took me to March of last year, 2021, to actually write it. So I think from January to March, I was working on that first draft and understanding, you know, because it's television movie, so it's 9-act structure, not 3-act structure, understanding that. And in the process, I think I was trying to take a writing class, and I was, you know, we're working with Joanne and trying to read scripts, and I was trying to actively learn on the job. That there was no job, but I was trying to learn on the job and prepare myself. Yeah. And from March until a few months ago, maybe 2 months ago, we've just been revising it. I'm up to like I was up to like maybe version 25. And she had been submitting it to Hallmark and Lifetime. And one day I got a text message that just said, it looks like Calling on Christmas is going to Lifetime. And I'm like, that's not like for this year, for 2022. And I was like, so that's, and it's not like language that is like so positive. It's like, it looks like, so I was like, I'll wait and see. And then she talked a little bit about the process. And, but even before that, I think in the summer, before Calling on Christmas happened, she reached out to me and said, do you have something, are you familiar with the movie Concrete Cowboy? And I was like, oh yeah, Idris Elba shot in Philly, sure. And she said, do you have something in that realm? And I was like, oh, so Concrete Cowboy, the love story. Right, okay. So the thing about me is I'm about as suburban soccer mom as you can get. And if you've seen Concrete Cowboy, that is set really in like, I've not seen it, urban story, right?
Urban story.
So when you ask me if I have Concrete Cowboy, the love story, I know you're talking about an urban love story.
Right.
I also know, because I advocate for representation and positive representation, that this saying of, and I try, nothing about us without us, is what I've heard from people that work from marginalized communities. So I just said, look, you don't want me writing Concrete Cowboy, the love story. It just won't pass the sniff test. So if that's going to happen, I'd have to work with somebody from the community that you are referencing. And that's a whole conversation about what community are you actually trying to get the story from?
Yes,
Having been an actor and having gone through that of how you would like me to portray certain communities, there's a lot of questions. So what I said was, look, I have a client who is a horsewoman, and she is pursuing a champion. She's trying, her goal is to become the first Black woman to win a national championship in what's called Western Pleasure. And her name is Esperanza Turvalon Garrett. I'm going to name her. You can follow her on Instagram. She's incredible. And her handle is Riding to Win at 40. And so I thought, well, what if we inspired a story based off of like my observing her and filming a YouTube video for her. And the idea was, what if this woman who's not from the urban community, but just more like,
but there are horses,
right? There's horses and there's love, right? So she travels to another place and she meets this rancher and they fall in love. How about that? And in the process, she's trying to become the first Black woman to win a national championship. And so she said, okay, great. I love it. I wrote up a one sheet for Hallmark. And so she said, okay, this is great. What would you do differently if it was for Netflix or a streamer like Apple TV? How would you imagine it? Because it's different, right? Yep. So then I was like, okay, well, I would do this, that, or the other. And she's like, okay, so like write up that version too. And so she got it to this big company and we got the verbal almost very quickly that they were going to option it.
Wow.
So I still have not, that was the summer, still have not received a contract on that one, but they keep saying that they're a yes for this. And for me, I'm like, that's great. I already have not only the Calling on Christmas, but they gave me a contract to write a second film, which I'm trying to navigate. And I'm working on the outline on that now. So,
wow.
Immediately, like this was just for me a zeitgeist moment where they were looking for Black voices. And, for me as a Black person, I've also had to come through the door with a little pushback and a little bit of customer education, I would say. So one thing is when you ask me, can you write a story from the Black experience? One of the things that I said was there is no Black experience. Like, we're not a monolith.
Mm-hmm.
I would be happy to write a story, let's call it from celebrating the Black experience, because I can celebrate my experience as a Haitian person or as a Haitian-American living in the suburbs of America. Like, there are different things that I can celebrate about the collective Black experience, but I will not be writing a film about the Black experience
Black experience.
because it doesn't exist. It's like saying writing a story from the American experience. Like, in theory, we get that, but every American is unique. There's so many different communities and socioeconomic backgrounds and people that have come from all these places to make America the salad bowl that it is.
But it sounds as if the executive you're working with is somebody who has been willing to take the time and have patience. So she comes up with, let's do Concrete Cowboy, the romance. And I mean, that film is really quite unusual. It's
Mhm.
not, is not, I don't know what I would want to say, a straight, I don't see translating that to Hallmark, you know?
No, and I think it's the note behind the note, right? They
Yeah.
didn't, I don't think it was about Concrete Cowboy. I think it was horses and Black people.
Horses. But the fact that she was, and you were able to work through that to get to that point of like,
Yeah,
oh, you know, horses are great. That's great.
right.
And the fact that it's based on a real person actually, doing those real things is really nice. But I think one of the things that to me is really interesting about your experience is that most independent filmmakers, and you're definitely an independent filmmaker, um, are working in a sort of creative vacuum. So they work, and they're like, okay, I'm making my work, and one day I'll get it finished, and then I'll figure out who the audience is. And yet the truth is that a lot of times when you're working inside in the industry, it's much more about how do we create what is wanted
Mhm.
and what fits a market, which is a very different way of thinking, I think, than most artists have. You know,
Well, I credit you for that. I mean, honestly, I came to you, I think January of last year. I started working with you January of 2021. And I think that was the huge shift for me. And I tell anybody who says, hey, how do you like working with Joanne? Or how did you like? I said, Joanne shifted me from being an artist to an artistpreneur.
uh,
Because even in the working with Dawn, in the pitching, there was a concept that I pitched, a log line I pitched that she passed on it. And in the process of working with you and listening to like this filmmaker's life, I think Ben Yenny and Mutiny Films, we had,
right.
and in that one conversation, there was the conversation about how family films are underserved. Like, a lot of independent filmmakers, I don't know why, a lot of us want to tell dramas, we want to tell horror, we want to tell genre stuff, but there didn't seem to be as many people in the family film lane.
Right.
And so there was this demand for family films. And I heard that and I thought, well, okay, I will take this romance that is going to be hard to make and she's already passed on. The story, the elements of the story can stay the same. I'm just going to make it a family film. So instead
Uh-huh.
of a love story,
Right.
right, it's a coming of age story about this little girl, but the core pieces of the story stay the same.
And
And
where is that film now in the
oh
process?
yeah, so that one is, I have 18 pages of that one written.
Okay.
There's strong
Tell
interest
us the
for
log
it.
line for that one, because
Oh, Joanne, with the, okay, so I'm not going to be able to get the log line because it's been on another desk for a long time. But I think it's something when an inquisitive 11 African-American 11-year-old girl discovers her ancestors helped George Washington cross at the Delaware. She has to convince a um, sourpuss reenactor,
curmudgeonly reenactor.
right, to allow her to join his group as they cross the Delaware, as they during a reenactment of the crossing the Delaware at Christmas,
Yeah,
and it's called Christmas Crossing.
Christmas
So
Crossing.
totally butchered the log line, but basically baby girl figures out that there are Black people, free Black soldiers that helped Washington cross.
There are free Black people in history.
Yes, right. Free Black soldiers that helped Washington cross the Delaware, and finds out that she potentially could be related to one of them, and decides that she wants to prove that she's related and join the reenactors as they cross the Delaware on Christmas.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. And we've run a little late, but I just wanted to see if anybody has any questions for you. You can see why Tatiana was so hard to work with. Oh my God. Documentaries and scripts and log lines.
I'm all over the place.
What are we working on this week?
I know.
I'm teasing you. You're fabulous. But
Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions for Kevin? Go ahead.
Hi, Tatiana. Kevin here. Good to see you. Thank you so much. This was just a great talk. And one little question. So when you're doing, I made the note of logline, 14-sentence synopsis, 1 page. Is that 1 pager include imagery, and is it designed, or is it literally like a 1 page just written treatment?
It's weird because, thank you, and it's good to see you, Kevin. Thanks for the question. It's interesting because sometimes it does include images, and the one thing that may be very frustrating to hear is that a lot of executives don't read. And so the images can help sell the story. Actually, the title and the image and the log line alone can sell the story. Mm-hmm. And so if you're looking at that one sheet, you want to do a tight 10 sentences, 14 is a little bit long, and then it's like a paragraph kind of an overview. Mm-hmm. So you've got your title, your name, log line, maybe a small image or two, then that, or however you want to work it in, that short blurb, and then a little bit more of an explainer, but it's 1 page with some contact information at the bottom. And that's it. It's tight.
Yeah. And do you think that's the same for like episodic as it would be for feature at that level, at that point?
I think, I'm not sure, but I will say yes, I do, because I know one of the concepts that I have called the Good Love Club. My exec has asked me to think about making it episodic, think about showrunners, and it still is. She's still presenting it as a 1 sheet because we really haven't developed it further. I will say it's very specific to who you are pitching to. So my experience now with her is like BET wants 6 to 10 page treatments. So that 1 sheet doesn't even work.
Right.
They need the 6 to 10 page. And there's other people that, like, honestly, it was a title. They gave me a title and said, what do you have for this? So it was the title and the log line. And I got the second contract. Like we were still formulating what the story was going to be when they said, we're going to, you've got this first one and it's going here. So we're going to give you the second one. Now, if I don't, I think this is kind of lightning in a bottle. And I want to be really clear that I would have to, I believe, deliver at the level they expect for that to continue.
Right.
So absolutely. I don't think you, I don't think you get
the time and on time.
And on time. Yeah.
I mean, it's just these sort of very obvious in a way, but not necessarily things that filmmakers are clear about. But it's got to be what they want, and it's got to be in the time frame and how they want it. So that was very smart of you to write the script when you did.
Yeah, I mean, if I hadn't had it, and that's the other thing that happens, I will say the other guy has an African prince story, and he pitched directly to Hallmark, and I could tell you how that happened. My exec said, and this is all, probably I shouldn't be saying this, but I think that it's just us friends. I know it's recorded, but it's just us friends. He had the executives from this other company had a meeting with Hallmark, and for a specific project that was not going to advance. So instead of losing that time slot, they slid him in to pitch. And so when they say like success is opportunity meeting preparedness, I will say kind of new information. We're pitching another production company a different concept. Because at this point I have like, I don't know, maybe 8 one-sheets. I have about 45 log lines because I've been working on it since, and I've just been spitballing. And, you know, the challenge we have now is, right, we've sold this one, so it's officially sold. And this other production company likes the one sheet for this other project and says, I'd like to see Tatiana's writing sample. So now that one's gone. And my exec's like, what else do you got? Like, get in the office and write something. And so it's a great problem to have. But I will say, if there's one thing, I know we're over time, but if there's one thing I can like leave you or impart with everybody here, is that I think the thing that I did most successfully was I pivoted. And I think that's my word. I was prepared and I pivoted and I took a risk. Like, it's a huge amount of work. I didn't know if I was going to get a check, but I knew that you don't get many cracks like this. I wasn't really highbrow about, oh, it's Hallmark. It's a movie, right? It's 90 pages or 100 pages of a script in format. It is about being polite. It's about being professional. It's about being kind. It's about not being difficult to work with. I have a story about that for a whole nother day.
Mm-hmm.
But the biggest thing was with, you know, and Joanne, I again credit Joanne, Christmas Crossing, that family film will likely be something that I write to produce myself and then find distribution. And if there's a partner along the way that wants to come help make that, that's great. But I'm no longer picking, I would not do a drama. I would not write a drama or even a romantic, like Christmas movie like this, to see these, how they have to put these packages together and how difficult it is and how quickly packages and all the work can fall apart and you have to start over. The one thing that I've taken from what Joanne has taught me is look at what the need is. Now, the needs shift. I see the mandates. Right. So pivoting, I think, is critically important because there is a need at one point, and then execs change. There's a jump. There's a shift, a shuffling of execs. There's a shuffling of projects. That project that you were promised is no longer going to this place. So now, like, Calling on Christmas was not written for Hallmark, so I had to retrofit it for Lifetime.
Right.
So I know that's long. We're long. So
no, but I think it's absolutely fascinating, you know, what you're doing. And you know, I go back to that first thing that you were on that panel,
mm-hmm.
and somebody reached out and said, you know, are you open to this? And it was a long way from what you thought you were going to be doing, and you said yes. That's really the thing. And I always say, I want my clients to respond to everything with an enthusiastic yes.
Yes.
And
yes.
Find out whatever you need to find out.
Oh yeah, that Clubhouse, all the things Joanne said.
Yeah.
I mean, the $10,000, I just have to say, is recharge your distribution. Joanne said, take this class. And I was like, Joanne, I already got like 50 things. And these guys are like firing at you, like with they both have fire hoses. They're just giving you so much information. But I took what they presented to us in class. I even used the samples that they gave us. I reached out to this foundation. I got a meeting and I got funding. Like, I think for me, my career has like supercharged because not just, and I have to say, being able to be in the group with the other filmmakers and doing a reading of my script, right? And getting feedback. And I was, very precious about that. I was like, I don't know if I want to share this. And so I think trusting Joanne, you got to make your own decisions. You got to trust your gut. And Joanne wasn't there to hold my hand the whole time. Like, in between things, I had to do the work. And so I would say that if, you all have your own unique perspective. I have always been working in the gaps of what I didn't see. And I would say, don't write what everybody else is writing. Don't follow, don't try to do the next Get Out. Jordan Peele is square in that space, right? Write that story from your family or your small town or your uncle. That's like, Ulrick was something, I knew this man. I went to all these brown bag lunches. People kept talking about the lack of positive representation of people of color in the media. I remember my mom always saying, there's a Haitian that painted an American president. It just seemed so crazy to me. And then I was like, I wonder what he's doing. And so 6 years later or whatever, we're looking at the finishing of this film. But through all the things, like the original ideas that I had for Hallmark and for Dawn, I have now landed squarely in writing like Haitian-American stories. My protagonist in Calling on Christmas is a Haitian-American protagonist. I started with just a Black American, but it was the specificity of the experience is what people seem to resonate with.
Absolutely. And I think more and more so, we want to see something real. We want to see authentic. To me, authentic is the word. From I don't know if it's from COVID or just before COVID or whatever. Authentic, and there is obviously some level of reaching out for voices of people of color that wasn't the case before. But one of my clients shared the other day that some numbers just came out saying that, and now I'm not going to get it right, but it was something like 90%, 97% of everybody who was nominated for an Oscar or something were all men. And so it's not as though things have massively changed, although it feels as if there has been a lot of change. It feels as though there has been a lot of change. But we, as my friend Janice Engel said, documentary filmmaker, she said, we have to keep kicking those doors open, because on their own they will shut.
Absolutely.
They will shut.
And I think that it's, you can be a man who is telling a story. Well, just tell a different story, right? Tell a story about your mom, a strong woman in your life. Tell a story about a painful time in your life. I mean, the thing for me is like, I need stories of hope. Like Ted Lasso is one of my favorites.
Oh gosh, yes.
Right? Ted Lasso is so beautiful, but also Encanto. We don't talk about Bruno. Everybody's singing this song. Bruno is a guy who is in the, well, I won't ruin it, but if you haven't seen it, you should see it.
I haven't seen it.
But Encanto is about like refugees and pain, right? And family trauma. And it's gorgeous. And so, I think keep learning, keep listening, keep pushing, and it's hard to do it all. That's the thing I struggle with the most. There's not enough hours in the day. But I will say I'm committed to working within the system and learning about the system and having one foot outside and doing things independently until somebody wants to drop a pile of money in front of me and walk away and just let me do what I want. That's the goal.
May that happen.
May that happen for all of us.
Thank you so much, Tatiana. What fun to have
Thanks
you and to hear everything that's going on. We didn't even talk about your independent, producing work that you do for hire. So that's been going well as well. So thank you very, very much. And just can't wait to hear the next thing that happens as in your many careers.
Me too.
As a filmmaker.
Thank you for having
so much. And anybody here who I have not met, Tamika, so good to see you. Next year, Sundance.
Yes, I can't wait.
Exactly.
Hello, everyone.
Anybody who I have not met, if you are interested in talking to me about working together, please get in touch. And we put something, Lexi put something in the chat. Thank you so much, Lexi. Thanks everybody for coming, and congratulations, Tatiana.
Thank you, and I'm going to read the chat later.
Yes.
Thank you for any comments in the chat. I didn't see any of them.
I can never read the chat while I'm doing these things.
I saved it. I'll send it to you, but I'm sure Lexi has it. Thank you, Lexi.
No, send it to me. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.